Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. My name is Carey Nieuwhof, and my goal is to help you lead like never before. So what I do every week is I sit down with world-class leaders and church leaders, business leaders, and I talk to them about what made them who they are and try to have the conversation with them that you would have if you got to sit down for lunch with them or have dinner with them or really got to spend some time with them. So we go into the backstory and we explore what made them who they are and some of the principles they've learned along the way. So if you enjoy this episode, I would love for you to like it, to subscribe, and also to share it with your friends. And in the meantime, here's today's episode. NEF Downs, welcome back to the podcast. It's so good to hang out again.
Hi, Carey. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man. I got to ask you, this is day 40 of lockdown for you.
Yes.
And perhaps by the time this airs, the state of Tennessee will be free again, or at least somewhat back in the open. But who knows where this crazy is going. I want to start by asking you this question. How has the global pandemic, COVID-19, impacted you personally so far?
Well, as far as the actual sickness, a couple of my very close friends got really sick.
Wow.
And so I've seen the virus up close, and it is ugly. And it is, I thank God none of my friends have died from it, but I have had friends hospitalized. And in fact, here in Nashville, one of my best friends was one of the first 10 cases positive in our county, which is why I got locked down so early, because I had been with her the day before she was sick. We were all, a whole group of us were together. She has symptoms the next day, is tested, and 2 days later, we're told by the health department not to leave our house for 10 days, which Carey, at the time, I thought, how will I ever survive 10 days?
I'm not going to make it. Moses did 40 years. I'm not doing 10 days.
That's right. I feel like I'm on the 40-year path now, but now we're 40 days in, and I'm like, man, that was a joke. 10 days is for amateurs. Anybody can do 10 days. I thought, but it was different because we were genuinely quarantined, meaning we weren't allowed to leave our houses. We got called by the health department 1 to 2 times a day. I mean, it was really intense, but it was because they were trying to keep it from spreading, which is, as we know now, is very challenging. And so that's been my up close experience with it. It has been scary to watch my friends be so sick with something that feels like an invisible enemy that no one can even figure out. And so that was scary. It's been really lonely. I am not married yet. I don't have kids yet. And so I don't have a roommate or any pets. And so it has literally been me
just
for 40
you
days.
And the walls.
Yeah.
For 40 days.
And that means no hugging for 40 days. That means no, and you just don't realize, I don't know about anybody else. I didn't realize what a life-giving part of my life physical touch was and is until it is gone. And then
I can tell you, we saw a half dozen people on Sunday, which is very rare. And it was social distancing visiting on a front porch. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a huggy guy. I just wanted to go up and hug all of them.
Yes.
And I'm like, what is that? That's so weird. And, I happen to be married and I've been with my wife for the last 40 days, but it's a very different scenario. I got to ask, did your friends recover? Are they in recovery right now?
Everyone is done. In fact, one of the great things, it's been a little bit of a strange experience for us because it feels like we crested over the experience really early. That does not necessarily mean that's true, but because my social group went through, oh my gosh, are people getting sick? People are sick. Oh, could I get sick? I'm really scared. I'm really nervous. I'm stuck at home. Oh, look, they're starting to get better. Oh, they relapsed. Oh, wait, they are getting better. Oh, they're better. We walked through all of that and have been done with that for 2 weeks. So I think that makes me feel a little more impatient because my actual social group, it seems to be on the backside of the experience. I don't know what science would say. I'm just telling you experientially what we have experienced is it's kind of like, oh man, it's hard to stay home when all my friends are better.
Yeah, that's very similar here. We have not been a hot spot north of Toronto. Yeah. And I was very concerned for my parents, for my wife's parents, and for other people. Right. And a few people's parents have had it, and they have actually recovered rather miraculously. And now I'm on I just don't want to line up to go grocery shopping again, which I realize is 100% selfish. It's 100% selfish.
I'm telling you that the only time I've had breathing problem level anxiety is at the grocery store.
Wow.
Everywhere else, every time I'm outside, I'm fine. We've done some social distancing things at friends' houses and I feel fine. But man, when you have to go to the grocery store and you're like, who touched that? Did I touch that? Why aren't they wearing a mask? Do I need to be wearing this mask? Like, I don't have on gloves. Are they judging me because I don't have on gloves? And I mean, it causes anxiousness in my soul. So I don't want to go because I don't want to feel that.
Yeah. Now, if not to get too personal, but did you end up getting tested? Because tests are pretty rare and hard to come by. But did they end up testing you officially for COVID, or you just had to monitor your symptoms?
That's right. So we took our temperature every day. And then the health department employee who would call us every day would ask, she called all 7 of us that were quarantined from the same party and would ask us the same set of symptoms. And I never had a fever. I've never felt off. I know that you can be a carrier and not have it. But this is so strange, Carey. So the girl who got it, that my really close friend who was sick, they were at a party the Saturday night before. This is the first week of March. And 33 people got it at that party.
Oh my gosh. So it's like a super spreader scenario thing.
And so what Vanderbilt University's here. And so they've been studying that up close group of going like, how did 33 out of 50 people show symptoms in 4 days or less?
Wow.
And the others. So I say to you, the reason I didn't get tested is they're so closely watching the group who did get sick that any of us that didn't have symptoms, they just wanted us home while they watched that up close group.
Isn't that fascinating? So the 40 days of quarantine, and I mean, for you, you're hyper social. You're out all the time. Like
all
you bring the fun.
Carey.
You are the fun. What has that been like emotionally and even spiritually for you to be in this relational desert?
Yeah, it has been really hard. I've had, when we switched from quarantine to stay home, I had one more day left of quarantine when our governor announced that everyone would be staying home. And that day was the worst one of all of them. Yeah. Because I was like, I was almost free. Like I was almost out and now everyone's going to be home. So now not only am I not getting out, but at least during my quarantine, people could come to my patio and they could be on the sidewalk and I could be on the patio and we could talk. Now people won't even be able to come over and I can't go. I mean, I had to like get under a weighted blanket and have a moment. I mean, I needed a break. So it's been really hard emotionally. I am very open in public that I don't want to be unmarried for the rest of my life. This isn't the life I would have picked for myself. And so it's not like I'm like, man, this is fun being alone. I'm like, nah, I didn't want this when I was social. I certainly don't want this when I'm stuck. And I'm an Enneagram. I identify as an Enneagram 7. And my behaviors and motivations look like that. And I know myself really well, Carey, and have done a lot of therapy, which is what I have right after this with you, is my counseling appointment. And my fear going into this and what has made it so emotionally challenging, I'll answer real quick and then I'll tell you spiritually, is that if I don't have pretty high boundaries on myself, I can be a glutton for anything. Okay. I can watch all the TV. I can do no work. I can sleep late every day. I can eat like I'm a terrible, and all the things that make you feel bad. I don't think there's bad food. I think there's things that my body doesn't like that I want to eat anyway. And I can just glutton out super hard. And so I've been scared of that every day, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
Right? And that's
being
emotionally
a 7,
challenging to be afraid of your motivations every day.
You're wing 8,
and to be afraid of yourself. Oh, yeah, I wing 8 for sure. I do. You know me really well.
Depending on the day, it could be 8, 7, 7, 8.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
And as our mutual friend Ian Cron would say, and my wife laughs at this when she read my profile, if anything is worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's it. So emotionally, it's been hard. And spiritually, one of my goals has been to keep a pretty steady schedule every day. So I still get up like I was getting up and leaving my house. I still get ready. I still have my time with the Lord in the morning. So that has remained kind of similar. I am reading through the Gospels this year every month. So I read a different version of the Bible, but I read January, February. I read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John every month. So I'm reading the same thing cyclically for the whole year. I just thought it would be interesting. I've never read the Gospels that much, and I want to know Jesus better as a person and as a friend. And I think if you listen to somebody's friends talk about them every day for a year, you're going to know that person better. and so that's what I wanted to do. And the coolest stuff has happened because every day, I mean, I'm on my 4th round. This is April. And still every day there's something I haven't seen yet. Wow. And so when I started Luke, I cried reading Luke 2, which we've heard a million times because even the kid in the Peanuts cartoon can say Luke 2. And he says it to us where, there were shepherds out in the field and they were watching the star, and I just cried. And I kind of had to have a check-in with myself of like, hey, be a good friend to yourself. Why are you crying? Let's talk about why you're crying. And that story was really true to me in December when my life was normal. And that story is just as true today when my life is not normal. And it is just what has happened for me spiritually is all the things that felt pretty solid under me, I've kind of jumped up and down on to see if I'm really sure they're solid. And like scripture. And scripture has proven to be exactly what God says it is, which is 100% true and full of hope and living and active. And so spiritually, I feel like I've gotten some good experiences while trying to be a good friend to myself, while being my only friend here, and having some emotional challenges and some sadness, lots of sadness and lots of loneliness. There's been, I don't want to be like, there's been a nearness of God, because I feel like that's like a cheesy Christian-y thing to say that any of our friends who aren't Christians would be like, what does that even mean? But what I would say is I have felt like I know God better today than I did 40 days ago. That's true.
It's a good place to be in. What is your self-talk like when you're discouraged, when you're struggling and you're trying to move yourself out of that place?
Yeah. I say this a lot to my friends and to people listening to me online, where I say, be as good a friend to yourself as you are to everyone else. Because you want to, like if I called you and said, Carey, I'm having a terrible day, you'd be like, well, what can I do? Do you want me can I order you something to eat? Are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you need to take, you would do whatever you could to help me. And so my self-talk has been, what does it look like to be a good friend to yourself, to Annie? And so there are times where there was a day last week where I just did not want to get out of bed. And it's just not an option when we have things scheduled to record or when we have work to do. And so I just put my hand on my chest and I said, okay, tell me why you don't want to get up. Just tell me why you don't want to get up. And then I said out loud why I didn't want to get up. And then I said, I totally get that. Let's list out 3 reasons it'd be great to get up today. I just talked to myself like there are 2 of me, which may sound insane, but I have no other friend
Annie.
here. I have no one else I'm going to cry saying this too. I don't have anybody else. Yeah. And so, sorry.
It's okay.
Who else is going to care for me besides the Lord and me? And so it is appropriate and not insane to ask yourself if you're okay and to answer. Sorry. So I've been doing that a lot. I've been doing a lot of self-care and a lot of self-talk and a lot of even today I said something kind of like off-center to myself of like, well, yeah, that is probably why that happened. And then I literally stopped. I looked in the mirror. I was like, hey, we aren't doing that today. You're all right. Nobody knows how to do this. I just had one of those moments of like, hey, don't speak like that to yourself, and self-talk, whether you're alone or whether you're with people, is Jesus said the greatest commandments is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love others as yourself.
Yeah.
Right? There were 3 distinct groups he wanted you to care about, and it's God and others and you. And I'm getting a lot of practice on how to be a good friend to myself.
I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing that, Annie. And I'm a little emotional too. I've not been very good to myself over the years. And one of the things I'm learning in my long journey is you deal with the issue and that it's not always personal, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So you did this or you said that, or, as an 8, it's probably you said that. That's 9 times out of 10, my problem. I said it. And, I am not my words and I'm not my action in that moment. And, we believe the story of creation and redemption for everyone else, but we don't believe it for ourselves.
That's it. That's exactly right. Because the way you would tell me about how to handle my mistakes is so different than the way you'll talk to yourself about how to handle your mistakes.
100%. And I would be like, Annie, come on. Like, I know you and I know what you do. And yeah, you got some moments, but like, come on. But then I'm like, oh, this defines me.
Yes.
And then you have to go, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And
I had a little conversation about this yesterday on Instagram because I said to the people following me on Instagram, I know what you would literally do for me, for Annie F. Downs, who you care about from a distance. You would order me flowers. Why don't you order you flowers? You would ask me if I'm okay. Why don't you ask yourself if you're okay? Treat yourself as good as you'd treat the person on the other side of Instagram that you think highly of. If you would treat yourself that kindly and with that much compassion, then you will better love other people too, I think. I mean, I think that's what Jesus said, is love other people as you love yourself. The more you become a good friend to you, you actually have more sympathy and kindness toward others too, because you're not, a lot of times that stuff we spout off and the stuff we say out of anger is because we're unhappy with something on the inside anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So the
and
more
you're a
compassionate
preacher,
you get towards
you're a preacher, an author, a communicator. And it really gets down, as you said, to our foundations. Like, do you actually believe that God loves people?
Yes.
Because if you're preaching it but not living it, it's very different. And you listen to the narrative of a lot of preaching, and a lot of preaching, we'll get to there at the end of the interview, but a lot of preaching is, you're terrible, God hates you, clean up your act.
Change your behavior.
Change your behavior.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll squeak by. And none of us believe that theologically, but that's how we behave.
Right.
Oh, that's so honest. That's so honest. And it's disrupted our emotional life. It's disrupted everything, our patterns, our habits. But, as an author, as a speaker, as a faculty member, a teaching team member at Crosspoint Church, everybody's had to pivot. Everyone's been pivoting. You're 40, 50 days into your pivot now. Yeah. What has that been like for you? Because you had a whole speaking tour lined up, and you're going city to city. You got this crew. It was probably a year in the making. And then boom, you can't even leave your house.
That's right. I think that's such a great word. I think that we should hold on to the word pivot, because what pivot doesn't require and doesn't say is that you have to let go of what you had planned. It just means you have to change. You're not ejecting from the map you're on and landing on a new map. The road just turns. All right. That happens all the time. That's part. You're on the same map. Your calling is the same. It's been funny because one of the things we do in my company is, in the first couple of days, weeks of January, we have a company-wide meeting. My agent flies in. I pretty much bring in everyone who works with us at some point during the year. And we make up a big yes-no list for the whole, like, here's what Annie is going to do this year, and here's what she isn't going to do this year. And pretty much, like, probably day 4 or 5, and I've shared about it online before. We haven't shown the list because it's, there's a difference between having a secret life and a private life. We don't have secrets, but there's private things in my company that we don't talk about publicly. And so I haven't shared the list, but we talked about building it. And I mean, I bet on day 3, Carey, there were people saying, has your yes-no list changed? What's different on your yes-no list? And I was like, hey, I'm still crying about being home. How about everybody settle down before you think about my strategy? But what has happened is none of those yeses and nos switched categories, because we know what we're called to, but there has been pivoting to those yeses and nos. Yeah. Some of the nos that were very good and very true in quarter 1 will be true again in quarter 3 and will be true again in quarter 4. But in quarter 2, they pivoted and it made sense. I had more time. I could do this. I could do that. And so for me, it has looked like we do a 2-day-a-week podcast for That Sounds Fun, but we added in a daily morning show that's just 30 minutes. That's just fun because I was so sad when I got on lockdown before the rest of my city that I asked my buddy Eddie, who's an author as well, a counselor, works for IJM. He said, he and I talk about a lot of stuff. He and his wife are dear friends of mine. I said, will you just start recording 30 minutes a day with me and we can just talk about whatever until I'm out of quarantine? Well, we thought it was 10 days. We have like 29 episodes now or something. But that's a pivot where you think, what does this, okay, you're going to love this story. I don't think I've told you this in real life yet. My last book idea, when I was pitching it to publishers, what I didn't know is that someone had written that book already. Like, oh, wow. I mean, the book. And after we pitched to a lot of publishers, my assistant sends me an email and says, is this kind of like what we've been talking to people about? And
that must be like the worst feeling in the world.
Title, cover. I mean, you could not have, it is the strangest.
No way. It's like time travel. You wrote the book and then you discovered it at a later time.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some there's some questions about whether this other author likes my things I talk about, but
perhaps was exegeting you a little too closely. Yeah.
Sure. Or possibly I've been a fan of hers and I accidentally dreamed up the same book she was writing. Who can know which way it goes?
Oh my goodness.
Either way, it was, oh no, all these publishers think I'm going to write book A and book A exists. And my agent said to me, and I freaked out, Carey. I mean, freaked out. I was like, there goes my future in writing because I don't know what else to write. And my agent said, this isn't, what does this ruin? The question now is, what does this make possible? And I thought, that's a pivot, right? The pivot question is, what does the quarantine at home make possible? So for me, it makes possible a 30-minute show every day because as you can see from my fancy wall decor, I nailed a blanket to a wall in my guest room so that the room sounds good. And we sit here for 30 minutes in my pajamas usually while I'm drinking my morning tea and talk. And that's something I can't do at the office. And so there's things like that feel very, that feel like a real gift in the middle of this. And so pivoting to me is finding the gifts in this. But we, and we can talk church strategy a little bit. Crosspoint has had to pivot on a couple of levels because our church got hit by a tornado.
Yeah.
And 10 days later, we were on lockdown as a city.
You were a portable church for 1 week.
We were a portable church for a week. That's right.
Some subscribers, you'll remember, we had Kevin Queen on as part of the crisis panel where he told that story. We'll link to it in the show notes just to tie the bow on it for some leaders listening. But that's incredible. And you're part of the teaching team with Kevin.
Yeah, I'm part of his teaching team. Yeah. That's right. And so, so we had to pivot once and then quickly pivot again. And so the question each time is either, why is everything being ruined? Or what does this make possible? And so I think and so for me, we're seeing that at church, that it makes possible that we can teach a new theme than what we had a whole series, as most churches do. We had a whole series laid out for the next 8 weeks, and Kevin changed it 2 weeks ago.
Garbage can.
As he should. As he should. And I could not speak more highly of the people leading Crosspoint Church right now. I am so honored to even be friends with them, much less get to teach alongside them. Him, Matt Warren that you've had on, Drew Powell that you've had on, Kevin Cook. I could just go on and on. But as I've watched them lead and watched them pivot, it has affected how I run my business too. Of like, okay, they thought they were going to do something totally different. What can I do now? Well, a morning show. I can get my novel written that has a deadline. I can do more Zoom calls. We actually have more meetings as a staff because we meet every morning on Zoom than we ever do when we're sitting in the office together. And it feels a little bit more intentional. And we joked before we started, I feel like I've done more work in the 40 days of quarantine than I did the first 100 days of the year.
That's very, very true for a lot of us. One of the things, Annie, that's interesting, I've heard a number of people say this, but they said that in these first month, 6 weeks, whatever, we're cementing our reputations. This is how you will be remembered 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So you think about what you said about your leadership team at Crosspoint Church and how your respect just went through the roof. It was already high, but you're like, oh my gosh, like a decade from now, when everything's whatever normal will be, long after this is a memory, you're going to sit around and talk about being hit by a tornado, being a portable church for a week, pivoting to online. These are the foxhole stories. You're going to talk about the 40 days of lockdown, daily podcasting. I'd love to get your take on that. How do you think people are going to remember even your leadership in this season? Because you've done something that a lot of people wouldn't have normally done, which is, you've gone to daily podcasting. And sometimes, I've listened to some of those episodes. There's not even an agenda. You're just having like morning tea with people with Eddie.
We talked 20 minutes today about the difference between soup and stew and chowder. So if you want to know the kind of content I'm going to be remembered for in 5 years, Carey Nieuwhof, you've really got me excited about it.
No, but there's something deeper here, which I think is fascinating. And we got on it last time you were on the show a little bit, but I want to drill down on it more. You're just friends with your audience, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I hope. And so that would be that would be what I want to be remembered for, is people felt like they had a friend the whole time. And the interesting thing, when that 10 days started for me, Carey, about day 4, pretty early, I got my first day in was Saturday. It was Monday. My first day in my own house. I live here. Like I didn't get put in jail. I get to be in a very nice place for myself.
Yes.
When my third day that morning, I felt in my time with the Lord, I felt an invitation, and I felt like he was saying, I want you to go first, and I want you to tell the truth. And so the days that this is too hard for me, I say that on Insta story, and I just say like, it's hard for me being alone, but it's hard for people. I mean, so many of my friends have toddlers, and it is hard being in a house with toddlers 24/7.
Yeah, it sure is.
And it's hard being with a bunch of teenagers who are trapped without their friends. And we're getting to the point where elementary, middle school, high school kids are starting to really grieve not being with their friends. And they're acting out. I'm seeing it in my friends' kids where they're being their normal one moment, and then they're super off the next moment, and they just miss their friends. Because we aren't cool enough to be their friends. And I get it. And we were playing a soccer game this weekend, which, we're doing like long distance kicking. And the little like 8-year-old got super frustrated, but he's super frustrated because it's all grown-ups and he wants to play with people his own height. Like, I get that. And so I just have to tell the truth about that stuff. And that is how I hope I'm remembered, is like, yeah, Annie was my friend during that. And she told me the truth. And because what happens then, Carey, is if people believe you now, they'll believe you then. So if they believe me now, then when I am on the Crosspoint stage, they believe me then. And when I am telling them something about Jesus, they believe me then, because they believe me when I tell them when I count how many days I wear slippers in a row,
Well, and I wish, because there's been a big discussion on my blog and in different forums about, production levels and what do you need. And you got a lot of pastors going back into the studio and setting up home studios. You have to have lights and everything. I wish for a moment, and I'm not sure we're going to put this on YouTube, I wish people could see the setup, because it's amazing. You have a $99.
Yeah, do you want me to just turn it?
What's that?
You want me to just turn so they can see? Do you want?
Yeah. Go ahead. Maybe we'll put this on YouTube. It's your call at the end of the day.
I mean, it's just a blanket
There's
nailed
the
to
blanket.
a 4-poster bed.
That's pretty high-end blanket you've got there, Annie.
Well, it is from Target, Carey, so I'm very fancy. And then you're right. I mean, it is a $98
Yeti mic.
Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly right. And a pair of $20 headphones. And I have it set up on a candle so that it's high enough. So we're really doing the business, aren't we?
That is the best.
And in 2 miles from here is my podcast studio with professional equipment and beautiful lighting. And we can't be there right now. And
so just to give people an idea of impact versus investment, which I think is really important. Do you have any idea in the last 30 days how many downloads you would have had on your podcast? It's got to be a lot.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that is easiest to look at is Amazon rankings.
Oh, yeah.
And our daily shows and our Monday, Thursday shows are staying, if you scroll down the top shows in faith and religion, we're peppered in all through it.
Right.
And so people are listening. We've doubled our listenership on a daily basis.
So you've doubled your listenership on a daily basis. And is that, sorry, just to clarify, is that Apple or Amazon? Is it Apple ratings? Apple Podcast.
Apple. Sorry, did I say
Yeah,
Amazon?
no, that's
My
okay.
Just the Apple charts, the podcast
2080
charts
emails. So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the Apple podcast thing. So and I know roughly your metric. So that would be like hundreds of thousands of listens. And
probably we've had millions.
Millions. Okay.
Yeah.
So millions of listens.
Yeah.
In the last month. Yeah. And you're literally in a makeshift studio.
That's right.
And as you said to me before we started recording, I don't even have a ring light. Like I never bought the ring light, right?
I know, because I was like, sorry, Carey, I don't even look lit up. Carlos Whitaker would just kill me because he's like so much better at setting up a good scene.
No, 100%.
I mean, even everything for my show we're doing on this microphone right now. I record it in Zencaster, and my producer pulls it off of Zencaster. And I mean, all the intros, outros, everything is happening just like this right here.
Mm-hmm. So we'll talk after. Maybe we'll throw it up on YouTube because this is the case in point. It is really about connection. It's not about production. Can you riff on that for a little while? What does connection look like with your audience? Because people are saying, like, if you watch Fallon or even, I don't know whether you saw SNL when Tom Hanks was in his kitchen, like, those are great moments, man.
Do you like that as an Enneagram 8, as a male, as a pastor, as a leader of leaders? Do you like the home looking feel of Jimmy Fallon and of SNL?
I thought it was brilliant. I really did, because what it does, it's the great equalizer. I mean, for podcasting with like you and me, this is my basement. Yeah, we renovated it a few years ago, but this is the basement of my house. And I met with my team today. There's 7 of us, I think, who work at this kind of full time. And we managed to reach over 1 million people every month. Like, it's insane. And you're like,
amazing.
A decade ago, this was millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment that you would have to make. You would have to own
literally
the airwaves.
a decade ago, which is not that
literally
far
a decade ago. You had to get a cable show to do what you do right now. Yeah. And I think the pivot that a lot of pastors are making is they just assume that this is going to take millions of dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars and a production crew. And I'm only as good as the quality of my production. And actually, you're only as good as the quality of your connection. And what Fallon showed with his wife as videographer was, and his daughters in, the crawl space.
Yes.
And doing the graphics and reading his monologue, like, to help people thrive in life and leadership, like, almost a monotone. And I'm like,
he's reading it off a piece of paper. Last night he did the first round of jokes on his phone and the second on paper. I was like, he must have just gotten those late and didn't get a chance to print them off. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of him. He's someone that if you said, like, outside of the faith space, who would you model after? It's Jimmy Fallon. Yeah. Because what every one of us feel about him, a lot of people think he's a little goofy and may not love some of the games and whatever. But what people feel about him is like, Jimmy's one of us who's gotten a really good break. Like, Jimmy's one of us. He's like a normal guy who is hosting the Tonight Show. And now he's in his house and his daughters draw the Tonight Show logo every day. And I have just been, and same with SNL. I was so impressed with their pivots. I mean, all they've done is pivot and still create something that makes us, as the person watching on the other side, go, oh, they're just like me. They're just like me. We're all just doing our best. I mean, I put up a YouTube video on Fridays and called Annie's Fun List. And we did one that is like chai, how to make an iced chai. Carey, it is, you pour the concentrate in and you pour the milk in and you shake it. I mean, it is like not.
Wait, can you say that again? No.
Right. I'm such a food blogger. Right. But here's the thing. That's what I drink in my real life. Mm-hmm. And B, it is great to show people that you're normal.
Right.
There's just so much posturing that happens online. So many famous people who have the ability to have these beautiful pictures taken at home and have a photographer with them all the time. And that's just not true for any of us anymore. That has never been true for me as an Annie.
Right.
And so there is something about the celebration of connection and normalcy right now that people really connect with. So when we see pastors doing prayer gatherings from their living room, I love that. Mm-hmm. It does not have to look. The only people that I've watched like get things shipped to their houses and that kind of stuff is like Carson Daly for the morning show he's on, the Today Show. Sorry, I couldn't. Yeah. You're like, well, you didn't even have to do that because Jimmy Fallon doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. Jimmy and his wife last night got in their VW van and put the camera up in the middle and answered questions from inside a van. Like that's. So what people want, what I want, Carey, as a person who's taking in content, is I want content that makes me feel like the person on the other side understands that I'm stuck and understands that I do not know how to do tomorrow and understands that I haven't put on jeans in some time. And, everybody wants to feel like you said it earlier, we've all been equalized to some degree. Now, that is a privileged position as well because we've not all been equalized. But the content we take in has all been equalized. There are people in our cities, in our country that are deeply hurting and have, homelessness, abuse that it is not equalized for them, unfortunately. But as far as the content we're taking in, Jimmy Fallon and I use the same pieces of equipment to get stuff out.
That's exactly it. He's not in New York anymore. I mean, I was there at the end of February, I guess, as the virus was outbreaking, but nobody really knew it. And, I'm there, The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. I'm walking right by it in just off Times Square. And I'm like, oh, now he's in his house. And whether he's in the Hamptons or wherever he is doesn't really matter. How do you, because I want to take good use of this time. I think you're masterful at connecting with your audience. So if you could dissect that a little bit for us, what does it look like for you to connect with your audience and for your audience to connect with you? Because they are loyal and they take action. Yeah,
they are. I'm very thankful. Part of it is that I do use the word audience. I don't ever use the word fan because I think that's super weird. And I'm like, no, don't. Why would you do that? Number one, I've lived with me every day of my whole life. There is nothing to fan over here. I have as behind the scenes look as anybody. It ain't that interesting. So I have built this career and this company and my work around my only job to honor God and bring him glory is to be friends with people. That is what I'm supposed to do. That is what I'm asked to do by God, I think, is like, can you just say to them what you'd say to any of your other friends? Again, there still becomes that like, not a secret life, but a private life. I do have a private life that we don't talk about online, but connection wise, when I open my Instagram, when I start talking to Insta Story, when I am writing up something on Instagram, when I'm working on books, when I'm thinking about who to have on the podcast, and when I'm doing interviews for my podcast, the very first filter is, what would you say to a friend? You're talking to your friends. What are you going to say to your friends? And so sometimes it comes out really dumb and silly, and I don't do it again because I'm like, well, they know me. They know me. They know that that's going to be, And so to me, the connection point, the thing that I work the hardest at, under the umbrella, because if you don't say this, someone will send you an email and I don't want to blow up your inbox. Under the umbrella of bringing glory to God, because that is why I exist on this planet, is to hopefully do a little bit of work that brings him glory, is to make people feel and genuinely feel like I'm their friend. And friendship is really valuable. People love having friends. And so my call on my life is to work really hard to make sure anyone who wants to be friends with me feels like I want that too.
You're so transparent, you're so open, and you're vulnerable, as we saw, even earlier on in this interview. How do you...
Well, it's because you and I are friends, and I'm telling you the truth.
No, I so appreciate it. But Annie, you're so real. And that's what really, this is a leadership podcast, and we're talking to leaders here. But often we can have a public face, right? And so I try to be vulnerable and transparent as a guy who's leading. But I watch you, and I watch our mutual friends, just two come to mind, Lisa Turkhurst and Voskamp. I was messaging Ann this morning, and Ann is just so raw at a level of raw that I'm like, whoa, that is so transparent. And
she does it so poetically. You're like, she's just... Everything she says rhymes so beautifully, like it's Snow White talking, but it's something terribly tragic she's saying.
I know.
She's amazing. That's
Ann, right? That is totally Ann.
I just like blow things up and cry. And I'm like, go look at Ann. She's so much better at this.
But it feels like you play with your life, not play with your life, but you come forward. You step forward with your life. And so that's why you can talk about, here's how you make a chai tea latte. Powder, water, mix it up. And then, I'm in day 40 of quarantine, and actually today sucks, right? Or Tuesday you ain't cute, or whatever it happens to be. And I just, I'm curious as to any advice you would have, and I'm thinking particularly to male leaders, and let's just say perhaps we're not as good at that, not to stereotype, but what would you advise us? Where's the line? Is there a line? Where would you say, oh, would you guys just please be more transparent? Like just coach me, coach us for a moment.
Sometimes one of the best parts about being on a teaching team with 3 men is we all read each other's work before we preach it on a Sunday. And so we usually see every sermon for days as it's being built before it comes out on Sunday. And often what I get to remind them is, this is such good content. Our guys write the best content. It's such good content. Will you tell me a story of your life? Like sometimes it is just so easy to make a list and to stack the 4 things that scripture told you. And it's so important, but you forget to tell me like how you are changed by it. And so what I've experienced with my guy friends and with preachers that I love is there's just always an opportunity for you to tell me why this mattered to you and why it stood out to you. Not just that it's true. That's a great breakdown of the scripture. But after you break down the scripture, tell me why you broke it down that way, because your mom said this when you were little and it stuck with you forever. And that's why that word jumped out at you. Or and I think all of us, I don't think this is a man problem, but I think all of us don't want to talk about our failures from stage. Yeah. But, or even on Instagram. I don't want to talk about, I still put on makeup every day, right? I'm not like being the most vulnerable Annie in the world. But when you have that tens of thousands of people looking at you, you're not walking out on stage without makeup. Why would I do an Insta story without it most days, right? And so there is still a level to me of being professional and not being like, I'm curled up in my bed, watch me cry. But there is a level of, hey, here's what I'm learning, but here's why it matters to me.
Yeah, I like that. I'd never heard anybody who counsels preachers, communicators say, why is that important to you? Because there probably is a reason why you're bringing that forward. And if you haven't intersected with the text or the message at that level, you're probably not the right person to bring it. It's not ready. Yeah. Right?
That's right. In fact, this morning I called another buddy preacher of mine, and because I was reading about the persistent widow, Luke, because I'm still in Luke. And it says, will God keep, at the end it says, will God keep putting you off? No, he will show justice and quickly. And I was like, has he been putting us off? Is that what we're supposed to pull from that? And there is a reason that jumped out at me. And so if I was teaching that from stage, my next move is, do you ever feel like God's keeping you from what you want on purpose? Because sometimes I wrestle with that. And here's why I'm wrestling with that this week, you know? And that doesn't feel good. And I don't want to tell people that, but I know when I read that scripture today, there is a reason that pinged me, is because God wanted me to ask myself, why do you think God sometimes keeps things from you? And so I have to wrestle that down. But so when my friends who are teaching or even, on Insta stories or leading in some public way right now, I don't just want to know the scripture. I want to know why the scripture matters to you and why did it stop you? Because that didn't stop me. I didn't notice that. Kevin taught last week about Joshua, and he did a whole thing about how when Moses changed Joshua's name, he changed it from, I'm going to mess this up, but I think it meant you will be saved to God will save you. Or you can save to God will save you. And the power switched off of Joshua to be the one who can do the work. Well, I wanted Kevin, and he did. I wanted him to tell me why that mattered to him. But I would have never caught that. But I love that he caught it. And then I wanted to know, why did Kevin catch that?
And on Kevin's highlight reel, you ever notice this? Whenever he shows up on Instagram, it's always his stories that make it.
Yeah.
It's always like, we were at Chipotle, or we were in the driveway shooting hoops the other day, and you get this story. No, that's a good challenge. I think a lot of men, I'll just speak for half of the planet right now, we hide behind our teaching and we hide behind our ideas. And
I appreciate how smart, I appreciate the work that goes into good teaching. I know I do it too. I appreciate the work that goes into good teaching. Just tell me that it moved you. Tell me you picked that scripture. Don't hide behind, don't keep to yourself why this stood out to you, because someone listening is struggling with the same thing you're struggling with, but they would have never found that in scripture, but you found it for them. So tell them you found it, and then tell them why you found it.
Everyone's got to find their own voice. And I think, if a bunch of us are on Instagram tomorrow showing people how to put powder and water or milk together and making a chai tea, it's probably not going to resonate the way it does. But I'd love for you just to take one more crack at this because I think it is multifaceted. Why do you think there is such an appetite right now for that, or for Fallon from home, or from hey, here's look at my blanket from Target and my $90 mic, and you're connecting with millions of people a month? Why do you think there's such an appetite for that?
Well, I mean, do you have a thought of why?
No, I think you're so good at it. Sometimes we don't understand why we're so good at something, and so. I mean, you've given us a bunch of reasons. Okay, let me ask you this. What kind of messages do you get back from people, whether those are direct messages or comments on your site or emails that you get in your inbox? What are you hearing? Because all of us have a feedback filter that we hear from, and often it's good teaching or that was a great idea. But what are you hearing?
Yeah, I am hearing that people feel less alone. That's what I'm hearing. And I'm hearing I think this is what God set me up for a little bit, but I heard a lot in my days, in my 20s, which was most everybody's teens of being trapped at home. I heard people saying, if you can do this, I can do this, which is hilarious because they're like, if you can do this, and I didn't think you could do this. But
I didn't think you were going to make it.
Yeah. And so I'm hearing a lot of, I'm the leader that nobody thinks they're following. Does that make sense? Like no one thinks they're shaping their behavior after me, or no one goes like, my favorite leader is Annie F. Downs. But yesterday I posted about the flowers that I bought in my house, and within hours, the company was out of flowers for the week. Right? So people won't list me on the list of most influential women in America, which is fine. But what I know is that my behavior and how I handle things seeps into people and changes what they think. It does not what they take notes on. It is what they breathe in. Does that make sense?
It does. And I would absolutely, see you as a leader. And it's really interesting because I've had this conversation with Lisa Turkhurst on this podcast, and to some extent with Ann Voskamp as well. And nobody would don the mantle leader. And yet, to quote John Maxwell, leadership is influence. Clearly, when they sell out of flowers for the week, there's a bit of influence going on there. Right. And, my working definition, because people go, am I really a leader? I'm like, I'll tell you what. Yeah. Look over your shoulder. Is there anyone following?
Is there anybody?
Is there anybody following? Because there are people who are like, I'm a leader. And it's like, I don't see anybody behind you. But not that you're getting people to follow you. You want to build them up, equip them,
because that's when you said that, what I thought is for myself, what I would say is, if you look behind you, is there anyone following, and how can you make their life better?
Yeah. And that's where it's going.
So when I go, okay, there are people back here, how can I make their life better? Flowers, Jesus, chai, a new bag, a sporting event, I'm like, how can we that? And so a podcast to listen to. So that definition rings really true to me versus me standing up and going, look, everyone, I'm leading. Don't you see me leading?
Because I've seen people do that, and it's like, but there's no one in the room, and there's no one commenting, and there's no one listening, and and I'm not saying that's not condemnation. It's just like, whether you have the title or not, when you get 1 million people or more dialing in, going, I just want to hear what you had for breakfast today, and whether Eddie saw that show last night, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I want to hear.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
Influence.
So I think that's what connection feels like, is when you feel connected to someone, not because they're telling you that you're leading them, but because you realize they're leading you. Like I'm not announcing to Instagram, you follow me. Right. But what I am experiencing is I have to be careful about what I talk about and what books I suggest and what TV shows I talk about, because people are watching and listening and like the things that I like. The people who follow me like the things that I like, so I tell them what I like.
Right. And you and I have talked about that before off mic, where you and I are both very careful about what we endorse or what we talk about, because if someone goes out and spends $8 or $14 or an hour on something and they're like, oh, that was a piece of junk. Yeah. That is a misuse of that leadership and responsibility.
It was a little bit of a struggle for me with Tiger King because so many people were talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
And I watched it And I wanted to talk about it, but what I didn't want to say is you should watch it.
You didn't want to endorse it.
I mean, yeah, I didn't want to endorse it, but I think it's a funny conversation. I mean, so I wrestled down a lot of that stuff and have voices like you or, Kevin. I have voices in my life, some women that help me. Do I talk about this publicly or not? And so, but because it matters to me. But you're right. If you have 10 followers on Instagram, you have people that really are listening to what you're doing. We should all be paying attention. It's not just those of us who have more than 50,
Yeah, exactly. And your influence is always, I don't think it ever stays static. It's either slightly growing or it's diminishing by the way you behave and who you talk to. I'm not sure it's a static thing. Whether your follower
count. It's probably good that it goes both ways. It needs to go both ways. There are times where my influence needs to shrink back in someone's life, and someone else that's a different voice at a different season of life needs to step in. And so those of us who have that influence, and when we start to see it wane, which it does, living in Nashville helps because you watch country music stars become shooting stars, where you see it go up and up and up, and then you see it explode and come down. And so it happens to everyone. It happens to everyone. You have a good album, you have a bad album. You have a good tour, you have a bad tour. You have a good book, you have a bad book. And so even in my own life, I have to go today, while I've got this amount of ears, while God has trusted me with whatever today's number is that's going to tune in, then tomorrow it may go up or it may go down. But you're right. I haven't thought about it. It may go up or it may go down, but God's trusted me with the exact right amount of people tomorrow, as long as I'm trustworthy. And one day it'll diminish and my wave will go out into the ocean, and I'll just care for the people who have my phone number. And and when that day comes, if that's what God has asked me to do with my life, I hope I'm thrilled with that.
I love that perspective. That is very refreshing. And what I'd love to do, because I'd love to find out who you are paying attention to. Who do you think is leading with influence really well? If people are looking for new follows, new people to read, and you're like navigating this season, COVID, the post-pandemic, reopening America, whatever's happening by the time this thing goes live.
Right.
Who do you think is leading well in this season?
Well, I'm probably going to say all people that you really love.
Oh, great.
And that you've had on or have thought about. John Mark Comer from Bridgetown Church in Portland. I feel like he is he's a gold mine. His books are incredible, but the way he's leading right now, the way Bridgetown Church is leading in prayer I haven't heard another church, and that doesn't mean they aren't. I haven't heard another churches publicly talk about, we fast on Tuesdays and asking God to remove this virus from this country. I mean, I haven't heard anybody else saying we're calling our church to fast to get rid of this thing.
No, I haven't either.
And so, and they do a daily meditation as well in the mornings that is very compassionate and kind. I listen to it every day. So I feel like John Mark's leading really well. There's a woman on his team named Bethany Allen, who's an incredibly good communicator. I think she's really interesting and she's great. John Tyson, of course, out of New York City at Church of the City. He's interesting because he's in the hotbed of New York. And so he's got a perspective that's very different from mine of being tired of being home. And the other thing I love about John Tyson is he has done the footwork, the travel footwork to figure out what brought on revivals in the history of the church and what the role of prayer is. And he is just, he's brilliant. Yeah. And so you listen to him teach and you listen to his podcast and you hear him on interviews. And I mean, when he was on my show, I was like, is this revival? And he was like, no, people aren't repenting enough. I was like, oh, he knows because he studied them all, And so it's not revival yet.
Right.
So I'm listening to John Tyson. I'm listening to Joe Saxton. I think Joe leads really beautifully. She is strong but kind. And I think strong, kind leaders are kind of worth their weight in gold. You can be strong and be too strong and be rude. You can be kind and too soft. And to find leaders who are strong and kind, I feel like is a really beautiful combination. So those are the ones that
those are great. Yeah, and Joe, the others have been on. Joe Saxton will be on at some point in the next few months. We just did the interview, and she is an Enneagram 8. So
yes, she is an 8. Strong and kind. Yeah, I bet y'all liked each other a lot.
Strong and kind. Oh yeah, she's got backbone. I really respect her.
Yeah,
I really
me
do.
too.
Those are some great voices. We'll link to all the profiles in the show notes. And
that's been a funny thing too, Carey, is that one of the things I think this is a particular Christian problem, is that I said this pretty early in the quarantine, but I think one of the things we have to do is limit how many pastors we listen to, purely out of you can't be discipled by 60 men and women leaders right now. You need to pick 2 or 3 churches. If you want to watch more than just your church on Sunday, commit to 2 or 3. Send them some money, tithe to them like they are your church, and stick to them instead of watching 9 one Sunday and 9 the next Sunday. I've found that for my own mental and spiritual health, having John, and Joe kind of helping lead me has been enough to keep me between the lines, besides my own church, besides Crosspoint.
I think it's a good advice. I mean, there's so much out there right now, and there's just so much noise. Yes. Yeah. You gotta pick your lanes. You gotta pick your influencers, and have enough quiet too, to be able to discern and distill it all. I love how you're reading through the Gospels.
It's great. Awesome. I've never done anything like this before, but I'll send you a picture when we're done. I Googled, read the Gospels in a month, and I found the plan. I wrote it in the back of my Bible. And so every day I just mark off 120, 220, 320, 420. And then every month I've asked myself the whole time, what's one thing about Jesus you didn't know?
Oh, wow.
And so every month there's been one little thing that stood out to me about Jesus that I didn't know. And this month, even though we aren't finished yet, there was this one, I think it's in Mark, forgive me that I don't remember, but they were talking about Jesus healing people. He had healed a deaf and mute man, and everyone was astonished. And the phrasing says, everyone was astonished, and they said, Jesus does all things well. And I was like, Jesus does. That is what people said about my friend. That is what people now I'm listening to people talk to me about my friend Jesus, and they say he does all things well. And I love that. I've just clung to that this month.
Annie, I got to tell you, every time we talk, I have high expectations, and you always just make it better. I don't know what that is. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you for what you do. We need voices like you and Jenny Catron helping lead the leaders. So
thank you.
I just cannot thank you enough.
I hope paradigm shifting for people. I hope people will go back and re-listen to the part about influence and sort of how this has flattened everybody, and why millions of people would tune into you every month, because I think that is a very different style of leadership and connection and influence that needs to be understood more, because the whole idea of there I am on stage looking really cool, I don't know. I think that's got a shelf life. I think it had a shelf life.
Yeah,
had a shelf life. Thank you.
I think it's expired. Yeah. So if we just change it from how great could these people think I am to how good a friend could I be to them, will really help us. Let's just ask, how good a friend can I be to the person listening to what I'm saying? And I think when people fall in love with the people of God, they're going to fall more in love with God.
And if people want to track with you, it's That Sounds Fun podcast. Yep. And the repository on the internet for all things Annie F. Downs is? Where would they find you?
AnnieFDowns.com. It's embarrassing how easy it is to find me. Amazing. Annie F. Downs on all the different places. So
okay. Well, till next time, Annie, thank you so much.
I'm grateful for you.
Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at CareyNieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at CareyNieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before.